Good morning and welcome to our MRTA conversation today. Our education series continues through the end of March here, and we'll kick it off again for the second quarter with our conversation about long-term care. I say the 201 conversation, more misconceptions, realities, and some modernized options that could be out there. My name is John Green with Association Member Benefits Advisors. I'm joined by your president, Nancy Craig. And before we get started, we again want to welcome all of you who've joined us today. Thank you for doing that so faithfully. Just a couple of housekeeping details before we jump off and let Nancy share what's going on in the state. All participants are in a listen only mode. And what that means is you won't see yourself like a typical Brady Bunch type Zoom webinar. You will only be able to communicate initially through chat or through the Q&A feature. So if you have a question, you have a comment, something you'd like to ask about, feel free to put that in the chat or Q&A. If you don't feel comfortable typing it in there, just feel unsure about that or want to ask it in person live, at the end of the conversation, what we'll do is we'll stop recording. You can use the reaction toolbar and hold up your hand on the reaction toolbar, and I can unmute you and you can ask the question live, and we can answer that question for you as well. We do record every one of these webinars. We put them out on the MRTA website probably within a week, a little bit less. We try to get it out there pretty quickly so that way you can review it if you want to with a spouse, with a family member, or just simply, catch up on something that you might have missed before. But I encourage you to go out to the MRTA website and look at the benefits section because it has all of the videos we've done for the first quarter. So you can catch up if you missed the first one. If you want to see some others in the past, you can catch up on those things as well. So you'll also notice this QR code down here in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We're going to have this periodically throughout the presentation today. And at the end of the conversation, we'll also leave it up for a long period of time. But it's just an opportunity for you to take your smartphone, hover over after you open up your camera feature on your phone and hover over that QR code. Because a little form will pop up. You can check what you want to talk about and you can put your information in there and you can get more in-depth information or a review of what you already have from someone on our team. And they can help you out with doing that. We've had several people that have taken advantage of that and just rest at ease and knowing what they've got there. So I know that Nancy's pressed a little bit for time this morning. So good morning, Nancy. I see on Facebook that there is so much going on in Missouri. Tell me what's happening right now and how people can get involved in this legislative session.
Well, John, good morning, everybody. We are very, very busy in Missouri. As you can tell, I have my MRTA road trip shirt on, and that was the unveiling of it. I was in Jefferson County. I live in St. Louis, Missouri. Jefferson County is one of my units. And so I went there for lunch. The picture with Maria and Sarah and Martha Schatz. Martha Schatz is going to be the new president in September. If I let her, I may just continue. They don't know that yet, but anyway, I don't think they will. But anyway, it's been a really good road trip. I'll start again on April 18. I'm going to the Boot Heel. And I don't know, John's not familiar with Missouri, but the Boot Heel is just what it says. It's almost in Arkansas. And so it's going to be a real trip for me. So anyway, and then I'm going to Stockton Lake area on the 20th, the 21st. So that should be interesting. So we're really busy. And I just wanted to let you know that I have had a long-term care policy, or I've been paying on it since I was, let's see, I guess I was, well, it was right after I retired, and I'm 58. I was 58 years old. So I took a long-term care policy because I have stepchildren and I have one child, and none of them can take care of me or would be able to take care of me. So I thought, well, I should take care of myself. So they sent me right before the summit in March 7. This policy had me making choices, and I didn't know what choice to make about the payment or if I should cash it out or what I should do with it. So I decided I would take it to the summit with me and talk to Gary DeVito. And Gary DeVito, we have a rapport because he's been with me several times at these meetings. So I took my piece of paper and I handed it, I told him the night that we were there, I said, during dinner, I said, Gary, I have something I want you to look over and give me some advice. So I handed it to him, and the next day at breakfast, he sat down with me and explained what was going on with my long-term care policy, and advised me what to do. So when I got home, I did what he advised, and I filled it out and turned it back in. So I still have it, and so hopefully one of these days, I'm turning 80, if you can believe it. I can't believe it, in August. So one of these days, I'll probably get some back out of it. I would like to use it on cruises myself, but I don't know if they'll let me do that. Will
That's
they
not
let
a
me
bad
do that,
idea.
John?
That's not a bad idea, Nancy. Maybe we can
Well,
put
that's what
together
I
some.
thought. I mean, you get 3 meals a day, you get a bed, you get to see a lot of things. There's a doctor on board,
That's
and
right.
if I died, they just can throw me overboard. I thought it was a real good plan.
I think you and I can corner the market on some type of assisted living cruise, something like that. I love
There
the
we
idea.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great
sounds like a
idea.
plan to me.
All right. Well, thank you, Nancy, for joining us. I appreciate it. I know you've got to run today, but thank you for giving me a great straight introduction into our conversation today. We've got a lot of things we want to talk about. I want to use Nancy's comments as a springboard for our conversation in just a moment. But before we do this, just a quick reminder, my name is John Green with Association Member Benefits Advisors. I live a little bit north of Houston with my wife, who is a second grade teacher. She teaches in the same elementary school that she and my 3 kids all went through. And I spent the better part of my career spending most of my time in the classroom helping educators who are active understand what their retirement years are like. And I love working with you in Missouri simply because I get a chance to go up and see my son whenever he was up at Mizzou. And he's back in Houston now, married, started his career, but do enjoy going all over the state of Missouri, and do appreciate the opportunity to join you today to talk about a lot of what the MRTA and MRTA members have asked us about. And just a quick reminder, especially with your new executive director, Maria, that's on board, with Nancy on the road show, with people getting back together, MRTA continues, even throughout COVID and now today, to be a strong watchdog on your pension, to make sure that you're getting those cost of living increases that you're eligible for, fighting to preserve any type of benefits, the manner in which you receive those from the state or your district, but also keeping you connected. Nancy mentioned a little bit about the President's Summit that we had not too long ago. Getting back together, getting back out on the road, seeing the road show and going back out and seeing each other is so important to making sure that your retirement years are fulfilled, but also that we have strength in numbers and getting more and more people involved in MRTA as we go forward. And then coming in to find exclusive discounts, benefits, partnership things that you can only get through MRTA. That's how MRTA is working on your behalf. And so, you know, when you think about the partnership, and our partnership between AMBA and MRTA is relatively new, but we're designed to come in and benefit members of MRTA by helping fill those gaps of things that aren't covered from your district benefits, things that you may have left when you left at the school, or you may have coverage now, but there may be some gaps in there. You may be on Medicare, and there's some significant gaps that you have in your coverage, but they're portable for whatever reason you leave the state. If you move, if you winter down in the South, or if you're just traveling, these coverages follow you anywhere. There's not anything that's tied to a network specifically in the state of Missouri. But our members at MRTA tell us they really appreciate having these benefits or access to the benefits because they can extend them to their family members. And think about it 2 different ways. You can extend some of your MRTA benefits to your children who may have aged out of any benefits that you had through the school, or often in the case of a long-term care and extended care need, you can extend benefits to your parents as well if your parents are still living. So there's an opportunity out there to really make your MRTA membership stretch even further, for lack of a better term there. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today, continue the conversation that we had back in the beginning of the month around this whole concept of home health care, elder care, long-term care, all those things around that. And I'm going to use Nancy's example of the situation she was in that many of our MRTA members find themselves in, and show you how things could have changed and why you may want to take a look at that. So today we're going to kind of recap a little bit about what we talked about at the beginning of the month about the basics of long-term care. We're going to show you what the current environment is in long-term care, meaning what are some of the statistics that are out there, how long people use it, what they need it for, things of that nature, and then show you how the current situation has led to some different solutions that are out there that may be different than what you've had in the past, address some of those concerns and questions that many members have talked to us about, and then help you make the most of your endorsed options from MRTA. I have had some great conversations with MRTA members over the past month since our first conversation in early March, saying, I have a plan. What do I do? What do I need to look for? Or I think I noticed that my husband is slipping a little bit and he's going to need some kind of care. What do I need to look out for? We're going to try to address some of those today. If you still have questions, feel free to drop it into chat, Q&A. We're going to show you how to get a hold of that throughout the conversation as well. But before we start, just to help me understand who's on the call today, I'm launching a poll out there, and I'm asking you, how prepared are you for the future? That you have some type of plan for your long-term care. You can hit yes or no, or you're not sure, and that's okay. We had a webinar here a few weeks ago. Some folks didn't know for sure if they had it or not, and that's okay. So we'll just take a few seconds to get out there and get a good sample of people, because it'll help me have our conversation as we go further here. So thank you for jumping in on that. We'll just open it up for about 5 more seconds. Jump in there. All right. Last call. And I'm going to end the poll now. I'm going to publish the results. This is a unique group. I applaud those of you. We've got about a fourth of you that have taken some sort of plan, some sort of step toward your long-term care. About 2/3 of you not so sure, or no, and then a little bit of you not sure. And that's okay, because sometimes what we think we have done in the past may not be what we think we need in the future, or what we need right now. So we're going to talk about all these things, make sure that we address any question that you have, and move forward with that conversation. And this is why I do this. This is why I'm so passionate about this. This is a photograph of my dad and myself back in July of 2020. He was at a memory care facility in Austin, Texas. We had to move him into this facility because it allowed or had the ability to give him more acute care that he needed. The facility that he was in, a little bit outside of town, didn't have that ability anymore. This was in July of 2020, right around his 80th birthday. It was the last time that he remembered who I was. He had been in the nursing home at that point for about 18 months and had dementia, strokes related to dementia. Last time he remembered who I was in July of 2020. He passed away in October of that same year. I am so thankful that he had the foresight, much like Nancy, to take out a long-term care plan many, many years before he ever needed it. And I kind of weave my story into this conversation today because I want to help you understand not only how it impacted his care, but how it impacted my stepmother, my brother, and I, how the long-term care conversation and planning can impact generations all the way down to grandkids, things like that. So this is kind of why I do it in honor of my father, because I want to make sure that everyone understands what's out there and the potential. And this is kind of a slide that really echoes what Nancy said and what my dad did. Back in the 90s, long-term care became very popular because many of us saw our parents or grandparents needing care, but didn't have the ability to provide the care. So companies started offering long-term care, and there was a significant rise in the number of individuals who took out a long-term care policy. At the same time, some state teacher retirement systems started offering long-term care on a group basis. Some school districts and some employers offered long-term care on a group basis. So you saw a significant number of people purchase these policies in anticipation of possibly needing it in their retirement years. Well, all of a sudden, the calendar turns on the new millennium, and people started using these plans. We saw a much greater increase in Alzheimer's and dementia. And insurance companies found that they could no longer sustainably provide coverage at the current rate in which they were offering these plans. So they started raising premiums on new business. They started tightening up underwriting guidelines so that if you had somebody in the family that had Alzheimer's in the past or dementia, they could decline you or rate you up, things like that. And then for existing policy members or holders, they started raising rates inside of that policy. And that resulted in a significant number of people saying, I don't want long-term care insurance anymore, or I can't afford to get it even if I want it. And so you still have this issue where people have it, but don't know if they can afford it, but they still need it. And so it's a little bit of a good news, bad news situation in the world of long-term care. And so I kind of want to give you the next couple of slides here, just a little bit of a look at where people find themselves these days. The good news is there are advancements in treatment, advancements in diagnosis, that things that used to, for lack of a better term, used to kill us, now people can recover from. That's the good news. Or we can detect it earlier and prevent things like that. So life expectancies are up, and there's so many different options for care out there. It used to be you stayed at home until you physically wore out your spouse, and then you moved into a nursing home. There was nothing in between there. There were no help to come to your house, things like that. The opportunities, the options are increasing out there. We're going to talk about that just a little bit. Now, on the flip side, because we are an aging population, because we are not replacing our aging population with younger people, we get older, there's much more of a demand, much more of a need for long-term care services, whether it be a nursing home, assisted living, or home health aides. So those things are growing quite a bit, and it's driving the cost up. And we'll hit on that in just a moment. Really, one of the bigger issues is the fact that we have smaller families these days. I think about my grandparents. On both sides of my grandparents, they were anywhere from 6 to 10 brothers and sisters. That's a pretty big care pool. They all grew up in the Red River Valley along the Texas-Oklahoma border. All of them were farmers. And so if somebody needed care, they just went over and stayed with mom, or mom moved in with them, something like that. Smaller families reduce that care pool. So now you've got families that have 1 or 2 children, or you've got maybe some more stepchildren divorce situations, and that may not be the person you want to take care of you if something happens there. Companies started tightening up restrictive policy language, making it much more difficult to qualify or where you had to go. Then Medicare came on top of it and said, we're spending too much money on skilled nursing care after a procedure. And so they started making changes that really tightened up the care abilities that Medicare provides. Companies started increasing premiums for their coverage. They started putting larger elimination periods, which put more monkey on your back to pay the money up front before you receive coverage. And then while all that was going on, COVID-19 came in and just gave a whack to the long-term care or the nursing home facilities. And this really came to me, it was a real situation with my father, because he went into his nursing home facility in 2019. COVID comes in 2020. We couldn't go see him. My stepmother was the only one that was authorized to go see him. And what we found out was that many nursing homes shared physical therapists. They shared certain specialists. And so they would rotate around to different facilities to provide care. Well, when COVID happened, you could only keep the staff that you had there at that one facility. So it caused a shortage of staff, and costs went up that way. Restrictions that the government put on in terms of vaccinations and things like that, protocols, really drove the cost up, or the ability of anybody to get care as well. So those things are kind of a challenge out there. But what didn't change throughout all of COVID, what didn't change today, didn't change last year or 2 years ago, is that 70% of us, once we reach age 65, are going to need some form of extended care. Now, extended care can be very broad. It can be like my father had a situation where he needed to stay in a nursing facility for almost 2 years. Or it could be that you need someone to come in and provide physical therapy for you for about 2 or 3 months after a knee replacement surgery. That's extended care. So it's a pretty broad definition, but because it's broad, it takes in a pretty good group of us. There's going to be a need out there. And when you look at Missouri, for the most part, is pretty inexpensive compared to the rest of the country, for care. You see these numbers out here across the board. I kind of went, east, west, center, and looked at urban and rural areas. And you see there for a home health aide, it's around $4,000 to $4,500 a month for someone to come in every day, provide those skills and services. You move to assisted living facility in a semi or in a private room, single occupancy, it's actually less expensive in certain areas because there, I guess there's some more availability, that type of thing. You move into a semi-private nursing home, then your costs go up. Nursing home for a private room go up as well. For my father, his was about $6,000 a month for a semi-private room. It was in a nice facility from a care perspective, but from a overall facility perspective, it wasn't the Taj Mahal, but we were pleased with the type of care he was receiving in that. So you can see Missouri is a pretty good situation. And we find that pretty much once you get Iowa south, the costs are very similar. Once you go to Illinois, Wisconsin, move up that way, or down into Florida, the costs go up significantly. So it does change across the country. I would encourage you, if you want to, write down the website at the bottom, genworth.com, GENWORTH.com. You'll scroll down on their homepage to a kind of a cost of care widget, for lack of a better term, and you can plug in your zip code where you are, you can plug in a city, a state, and it will give you what your average costs in the area are. What we've noticed lately, especially in a state like Missouri or in Texas where I am, because the cost of gas is going up, home health aid costs are going up. So that cost, if you're more rural, could be more expensive, depending upon the mileage that the home health aid has to travel. We looked at back on the 10th about the historical components of a long-term care policy. We kind of positioned it in the analogy of a good hamburger, where if you qualify, your buns are your qualification. You qualify for a long-term care policy to go on claim, if you have a long-term care policy, I should say, by losing an activity of daily living. Usually 2 or 3 are in the policy that you have to lose: bathing, toileting, transferring, feeding, wiping your backside, that kind of stuff like that. Or you have a cognitive impairment like dementia or Alzheimer's. Once you have one of those qualifications, then it triggers your policy to pay for that. Now, there are 2 types of meat in the policy, meaning where the money is, so to speak. Some policies had a daily benefit amount that reimbursed you anywhere from $100 to $300 a day. Some policies had a pool of money that said you have this pool of money that you can pull from all the way from day one. And if you want to, you can spend it down in a year, or you can spend it down over a long period of time. Length of coverage. Sometimes the policy is determined by 3 years, 5 years, lifetime, or in that pool of money situation, just as long as that money lasts. The elimination period in many policies is probably 90 days or 180 days, which means that you're responsible for the first 90 or 3 to 6 months of your care and the expense before the policy kicked in. And that can be pretty expensive. Some policies had a really strong definition of where location of coverage, meaning that you could be covered in a nursing home, or you could be covered in your home for a little bit less. Some had the ability to have assisted living facility coverage in there. So some of those traditional policies have that. Some policies have an inflation protection rider on there, which means that your premium goes up, not your premium, sorry, your coverage goes up by a 3% or 5% simple or compound interest over a period of time. So that in Nancy's case, if she took it out when she was 58, we know that now, 12, 13 years later, it's more expensive to have care provided for you, but that inflation protection would keep up with that. Some things to point out with this, and this is why I highly encourage those of you who have a long-term care plan now, pull that out and take a look at it. Some of the inflation protection provisions in those policies were what were called optional offerings, meaning they would send you a letter every couple of years that said you can increase your coverage for an additional premium without any underwriting, no qualification. So if you were sick and you wouldn't qualify anymore, it didn't matter. You could still increase your coverage for a small premium. But if you declined it or declined 2 of those letters, you could no longer get that coverage. So it's real important to understand what some provisions you may have had in your policy. Then non-skilled services. Many old policies did not cover what I call non-skilled services like cooking, light housekeeping, sitting up with someone. To give you an example, before my father went to a nursing home, he would get up in the middle of the night and just wander around the house, sometimes wander outside. It got to where it would be a danger to him to be that way. So my stepmother needed to find someone that could come in at night while she slept, because she still worked, and just sit up just in case my father wandered off. That's a non-skilled service. Many old policies don't provide that provision in there. They require everything to be a skilled home health aide or a skilled nursing facility. So it's important to understand the different components of a traditional long-term care policy. Pull yours out, let's look at it and see what you have, because it may need to be modernized and you may have some options that you have out there. So just like Nancy mentioned, some of you who were, I applaud you for taking out a long-term care policy. You may find yourself in this situation right now. You may find sizable rate increases on a policy that you already have, that the premium stayed level forever. Then all of a sudden you get a letter that says, we're going to have to raise your rates because our experience has gone out the roof, that kind of thing. Some carriers within that policy, or when they tell you they're going to raise rates, they may offer to reduce your coverage just to give you a level premium. That's an option that's out there. Some are saying you can take a longer elimination period, meaning that you take responsibility for more money up front, but they're going to in turn give you coverage at the same rate without raising your premiums, that type of thing. Some of you will look out there and say, you know what, I'm not sure this coverage matches what I need now or what I'm going to need in the future, because I didn't put inflation protection on there, or I've moved to a place that's more expensive, something like that. And then, as I mentioned before, some of the old policies had a restriction on where you could be taken care of. Or if you were taken care of at home, it had to be a skilled nurse. It couldn't be a family member that didn't have licensed skills, that type of thing. Or there was no coverage or less coverage for home care, that type of thing. So that may be where you find yourself now. That's when we have this conversation, so that you can maybe pull out that policy, have someone review it just like Nancy did, and let you know where you are, where you stand, because you may have everything you need, or there may be some things around the edges that you can solve for and give you greater peace of mind without scrambling your nest egg or worrying about something like that. So let's look right now at what the current situation is overall in long-term care, because I want you to think about this. Remember, old policies were designed to either give you a pool of money or to give you coverage for 3 years, 5 years, or lifetime. Okay. 28 months is the average amount of time that someone spends in an assisted living facility. Now, remember, an assisted living facility is kind of that interim facility where you go in and you buy or rent your apartment or condo or whatever type of housing unit it is. And for the most part, you're good on your own. You can come down to the dining facility and eat, take advantage of all the activities, things like that. And if you need someone to check in on you, just to make sure you're getting your meds properly, come do a little light housekeeping, maybe some wound care, something like that. That's what an assisted living facility does for you. The average time people spend there is a little over 2 years, but almost 60% of those who start in an assisted living facility, they will move to a skilled nursing facility. So think true nursing home. They will move to a skilled nursing home facility. So there is that progressive need for care out there. On average, people spend about 2.2 years in a nursing home. Now that varies based on male and female. Men spend about 8 months in a nursing home facility on average, and women will spend over 2.5 years. What was interesting is that Alzheimer's patients will spend an average of 9 years in a nursing home facility. And that's simply because all that's impacted, and I hate to say all that's impacted, is the mind. The body is still sound, the body's still strong, and you can spend a long time in a facility. And so if you've got a family history of Alzheimer's, I would highly encourage you to make sure that you think you've got proper coverage for a more lengthy period of stay, possibly. But the one stat that jumped out to me is that little less than half of all people who go to a nursing home will stay less than 100 days. So I want you to write down 100 on a piece of paper there somewhere, because I'm going to come back and hit on that 100 number. And it's not because they pass away within the first 100 days that they go to a nursing home by any stretch. It's all financial, and it's all who pays during that 100-day period. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, come back and hit on that a little bit more there. So that's kind of the current look at where long-term care, where care is in terms of nursing home or facility or assisted living care. There are other options out there today, and that's really why we're having this conversation, to let you know that there are more modernized options. Sometimes these are less expensive options. Sometimes they are broader in coverage, shorter in time period, to fit the need more acutely than what used to be the old standard long-term care policy. There are plans that can give you certain weekly benefit amounts for just a year or just 90 days, things like that, that help with your elimination periods. Some that are just for home coverage, some that provide coverage for non-skilled people to come take care of you, things like that. We're going to kind of dive in on each one of these check boxes here and help you understand what your options are and what to look for if someone reviews your policy and says you may have this gap here. How can you solve for that gap? So let's jump on into that. Let's talk about that, the meat and the cheese and the hamburger, that daily benefit amount or that length of coverage time period. Now there are daily and weekly benefit options up to $1,200 per week, meaning that if you have to have someone come to your home or you have to go into a nursing facility, need long-term or extended care, you can get more money quicker, for lack of a better term, $1,200 a week if you want it, or you can get less money if you need it. It can be smaller, so it can really be customized to your budget much better than it used to be. And these benefits today are oftentimes paid regardless of any other coverage that you may have out there. Any other coverage you have with another long-term care plan, any other coverage that you might have through Medicare, if there is any, or through any other health plan, anything like that, or a disability plan, if you have a disability plan, these things operate totally outside of that. So it gives you much more flexibility in how you use that money. You can start as small as 13 weeks of coverage. So if you have a slip and fall and you just need someone to come take care of you for a recovery period of time, there's coverage for that as well. And they go all the way up to a year. Now, in my mother's situation, she turns 81 in May, and my brother and I are looking at something for her that what we call, let's keep mom at home for a year, meaning that we've started to notice that she's slipping a little bit. She can't do some of the things she used to. She's still very active, drives all the time, shops, goes out with her friends, goes to church, not an issue at all. But if something did happen to where she couldn't take care of herself in that regards, that we would have a policy that would pay for someone to come stay with her for at least a year while we got her affairs in order to possibly move her somewhere else if necessary. So that 1 year period allows us to do that, gives us great flexibility on those type of things. And some of these plans, what have called a recurring benefit, meaning that, say for instance, you have a knee replacement and you need 3 months of recovery, of skilled recovery. It will pay you for that. And then after a period of time, your benefits are back to whole again. And you can replace the other knee, or you have a slip and fall, or there's some other knee. So it's not just a use it one time and you're over. You have some ability to replace those benefits up to a maximum over a lifetime period. Just a lot more flexibility that you don't have to dip into the nest egg, especially with the stock market down, something like that. You don't have to spend assets you weren't planning on, and it keeps it within a pretty good budget and within a tight time frame. So that's an option for you out there on the daily benefit and the length of coverage. Now, we talked about elimination period. And if you weren't with us back on the 10th when we talked about it in greater depth, the elimination period, think of that as kind of like the deductible on your homeowner's insurance policy, that whenever one of those bad springtime storms comes through and you have to replace your roof, the deductible is the amount you pay out of your pocket before the insurance company picks it up. The elimination period in the long-term care policy is the period of time, usually 90 days to 180 days, that you're already needing and receiving long-term care, but the insurance company doesn't pay for that. You're responsible for it before their policy kicks in. There are plans that allow you to cover that elimination period off the bat. You can select a 0 day. So the minute the doctor says you have dementia, you have Alzheimer's, or your condition with arthritis, you're not going to be able to get back up without any pull bars. You're not going to be able to transfer, feed yourself, that type of thing. The money comes in right away. You don't have to worry about that elimination period. You can also select 20 days or 100-day waiting period. You can select a little bit longer. It allows you to have more control over the money for the long run. That's what I like about it, because it's always been positioned to me that that first dollar, that when you're sitting around the table thinking about how we're going to take care of mom, that first dollar is the hardest to find, because it may mean that you have to spend down assets. It may mean that you have to sell some family land, take up a collection amongst you and your brothers, that kind of thing like that. This type of plan allows you to get that money up front quicker and not have to worry about an expense out of that. I've got some coworkers that I work with that have had clients that had a slip and fall, and she spent about 95 days in a skilled nursing facility recovering from a hip fracture. She had a long-term care plan, but it had a 90-day elimination period. So she was out $30,000 before her policy kicked in. These type of new plans through MRTA can eliminate that elimination period, for lack of a better term. What if you don't want to go to a nursing home? No one ever wants to. And that was the most difficult decision that I saw my mother do with her father back when I was in high school. And it was an extremely difficult situation when my stepmother had to call my brother and I and said, I think we have to put your dad into a nursing facility. I can no longer take care of him. He's not safe anymore. You work all your career. You're in your retirement years, or your parents are, in their retirement years as well. Why don't you have control over where you want to be taken care of? New plans that are out there allow you to have the choice of where you want to be taken care of. Do I want to be taken care of at home and have a home health aide or a non-skilled person come stay with me? Do I want to go to an assisted living facility? Where do I want to be taken care of, and what manner do I want to be taken care of? You get a lump sum benefit with some plans that give you 100% choice, that allow you to make that decision. Some of them, like I said, have that non-skilled provision in there that simply says, if you need a son or a daughter, or you want somebody from church to come stay with you and you can provide them with a little income, it allows you to do that. And sometimes these plans have the ability to have extra cash if you've got to go into the hospital for a few things, or emergency room trips, things like that. So it can keep you from going to a nursing home if you've got this type of plan, because the care can be provided for you in your home, where you're more comfortable, where you're, know your surroundings, that kind of thing. And if you're still married, your spouse is still alive, it allows you to stay with your loved ones as well. These stats jumped off the page to me because unfortunately I see this quite frequently. The one on the right that says 73% of all long-term care is provided in somebody's home by an informal caregiver who receives no compensation. So think about parents that now their son or daughter has to quit their job to come take care of them or move in with them, something like that. And somebody in the family has to do this without any compensation. Now, if we can do that, and that's great, we can afford to do that. Unfortunately, we've got so many dual income households, we can't afford to do that anymore. And you see the impact there on the left. For many women who have to stop their careers, it can cost them over $300,000 of earning power in their lifetime. Now think about it. Many of you on this call were retired educators. You taught all your life, you qualified for a pension, and you're receiving that pension. If you would have left your career early, it could have impacted how much you received in pension. It could have impacted whether you were eligible for a pension or not. That could impact your family and the generations down from that, because they have to take off time from their job. We also see many educators that retire when they're eligible and take on another career outside of the classroom for their, in their years that they're in their late 50s, 60s, before they fully retire in their 70s. We have some folks that I've worked with, they had to stop that income stream, that job, to take care of a parent. And so things that you may have planned to take care of an elderly parent or for your children to take care of you can really scramble that up without good long-term care planning. And that's the reason why there's so many options that MRTA has for you. And we get these questions all the time. They say, I'm too old. I can't qualify for long-term care. Some of these plans go beyond typical long-term care age qualifications. They'll go up to age 89. It's not traditional long-term care like we talked about initially, but there are plans that cover some of those gaps, things like that. Some will say, well, I've got health issues. I've had knee replacement surgeries, or I've had arthritis, or I've had a heart attack or a stroke, and I can't qualify for long-term care. There are some plans that have less restrictive qualifications. That's the good news. Some of these plans have nothing to do with family history. Great news. In my case, it's very difficult and expensive for me to qualify for long-term care because of my father's dementia history. So I've got family history that precludes me, but there are plans that are less restrictive in their qualifications. And then the big one, just like Nancy talked about, she already has a long-term care policy. The 25% of you on this call today that have a long-term care policy, I have that, but my premiums keep climbing up. Do not, please listen to me, do not cancel that policy. Let's review it. You may have some options, just like that letter that Nancy said she received. You may have some options that tell you what you can do with premiums, with coverage, with deductibles, things like that. There may be even some options if you have to cancel the policy or stop paying on it, but you still have coverage based on what you've paid into the policy. So don't do something without letting someone review that policy, because you may be giving up some rights that you've already paid for. So please let someone review that policy and take care of that for you. Now, I've mentioned it a little bit, but I want to touch on this a little bit more clearly. There are many on this call today that say, I think I've got a long-term care situation, or I've got my plans taken care of, but that's only if I'm not going to recover from some illness, injury, dementia, something like that. What about short-term events like a knee replacement or a hip replacement, something like that? These are things that will incapacitate you to where you can't walk, you can't do things for yourself maybe, but they're not going to be chronic. They're not going to be there forever. There are some plans that are out there that allow for short-term care that give you income to defray the costs and expenses of like an in-home physical therapist, or someone to come out and do some things for you while you recover. Those things are out there. They're designed because Medicare has stopped providing for many of these services. Many of these procedures, which in the past, based on the medical coding that Medicare had out there, would qualify you for skilled nursing care after the fact. Nowadays, Medicare has changed that coding and treating it as an outpatient service. Even if you spend the night in the hospital, there's no skilled nursing care or skilled recovery care built in to pay for by Medicare after the fact. Now, I told you to write down that number 100. And the reason I tell you to write down that number 100 is Medicare does have some provisions where they will pay for certain skilled nursing care, but only up to 100 days. So that stat where you saw that almost 50% of people who go into a nursing home stay less than 100 days, that's usually because Medicare stops paying any contribution and they no longer can afford to go to a nursing home. So to understand how Medicare works for you, I'd encourage you in the moment when we have the QR code up there, let Gary or Kel or somebody on his team explain how Medicare works. Explain how Medicare would work in a knee replacement situation. Explain how Medicare would work in a slip and fall or an accident or heart attack situation. And explain how Medicare would work in just a simple, I don't want to call it simple, but in chronic arthritis or dementia, something like that, because you'd be surprised at what they do and don't cover. And I would want you to go in knowing full well what is out there and available to you as well. So we've talked about all different types of extended care, all different reasons people need extended care. There are four main ways that people pay for extended care. Unfortunately, most of them will pull from assets, savings, their personal savings, sell land, sell something, do something, pay down a 401k. 403B, usually you can't call the pension board and say, hey, I need extra care. Can you double up my pension? That doesn't happen, unfortunately, that way. Then you saw the numbers that said most people receive care from family and friends. And it's not like a GoFundMe on Facebook. It's, hey, daughter, I need you to come move in with me, or me move in with you, and get taken care of that way. Some enter the Medicaid program. I'm going to talk about that in a moment and how difficult that is to qualify. And then others will take the step, like 25% of you, and get or look at some form of extended care coverage. And it's important to understand what's out there, what your options are, and what you can and can't qualify for before it's too late. The older you get, the more difficult it is to qualify, but having that peace of mind. And when my father took his policy out in the 90s, when he was 61, 62, totally healthy as a horse, played church basketball all his life, and extremely healthy, took out this plan. 2 years later, he had a minor stroke coming back from a business convention. He was still working, recovered from that, continued to work until he retired at 67, worked for about 7 or 8 more years, but just went into a significant dementia-related decline to where he didn't know where he was, things like that. We were so thankful that he had had the vision and foresight to take it out when he was much younger, because he wouldn't have qualified had he waited any longer after that stroke. He wouldn't have qualified whatsoever at all. So we talked about Medicaid, and I want to touch on Medicaid because oftentimes I get this question, well, won't Medicaid pay for everything? Medicaid is truly a last resort type program. It's not anything to do with Medicare. Medicaid is totally separate from that. And it has a lengthy or a stringent qualification period for that very reason, because it does pay for a lot of care. You start to say like my brother and I had this conversation right after Christmas this year when we noticed my mom repeating herself, forgetting things like that. So you sit down with your brothers and sisters and you say, I notice mom is not the same as she used to be. She's going to need care sometime in the future that we can't provide. And so the common thing is, let's see if we can get her qualified for Medicaid. Well, let's transfer all of her bank account money. Let's spend down her assets. Let's sell her house. Let's do all these things. And then we'll make her poverty stricken to qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid has this look back provision that says, okay, I see where you're trying to qualify. Let's go back and see what you've done the past 5 years and look to see if you've been trying to move assets, do things like that. You have to meet those poverty guidelines. Usually educators, because they have a pension, do not meet that poverty guideline. I'm not saying you're getting rich on your pension, but you don't meet the poverty guideline. Some people will try to set up a Miller's Trust. And this is a manner in which you can go about to set up a Miller's Trust that basically takes all your assets away from you and makes you poverty stricken. The problem that I found with the Miller's Trust is it's irrevocable, meaning that if mom never needs long-term care, or you never need long-term care, you can't get that money back. That trust is gone, it's somewhere else. And like I mentioned, those on pensions don't usually qualify. And then what happens is, say you do get qualified for Medicaid, or your mom gets qualified for Medicaid, and then she passes away after receiving care, the state of Missouri is going to come back and try to recoup those expenses from her estate. So it's never really free care. And it's not necessarily the quality of care that I would want anyone to go through as well. My father's facility, where he was the first time out in Marble Falls, west of Austin, had 3 wings on it. 2 wings were private payer wings, where anybody who had long-term care or paid out of their own pocket, the staffing to patient ratio was very high, lots of activities, things like that. Then there was a 3rd Medicaid wing that didn't have the staffing to patient ratio, maybe didn't participate in some of the activities, the physical therapy, things like that as well. Would not be necessarily someplace that I'd want to put someone that I loved if they had to qualify that way. Now, we often get questions, and I had a great conversation with an MRTA member here a week or so ago that wanted to know, what are some other ways that we could possibly pay for your long-term care if we don't qualify for long-term care because of health issues, something like that? There are a couple of ways that are available to you, and I'm going to walk you through these in just a little bit of quick fashion. Some life insurance policies have a provision, and it's a free provision in the policy. You didn't have to pay for it, Some life insurance policies have a provision that give you the ability to access at least 50 or up to 50% of your face amount of your policy, up to a certain amount that you can use for certain long-term care situations. So to give you an example, say you had a $200,000 life insurance policy through XYZ Life. In there is a provision that says you can take up to half of that face amount, or $100,000, and use for long-term care situations. Usually what the policy will say is it has to be confinement in a nursing home. So it couldn't be to use money for your home care, but it is confinement in a nursing home. And then if you use that $100,000 and you pass away, you're then beneficiary to receive the balance of the policy, or 100,000. So it really doesn't cost the insurance company anything. It just accelerates the use of money while you're living. It gives you that provision. Again, if you've got a policy like that, I encourage you to hold on to it, have somebody review it, make sure it has that provision in there, because that's a nice feature, a nice peace of mind that if you do need some long-term care, you have some money that way as well. There's another option that's out there. It's an MRTA endorsed tax deferred asset protection plan that has provisions in the policy that allow you to use the money in the account for long-term care without penalty, meaning that you can take out the money that you need to without penalty for long-term care. It also has another provision that allows you, whenever you're starting to receive your money out of it, and if you need long-term care, it will double the payout. This is the type of plan that I have. I took an old cash balance pension plan from a former employee, put it into this deferred asset protection plan. So I'm not paying taxes on it. And if I need it for care for myself or my wife, I can dip into it without penalty. If, say, whenever I reach 65 and I start taking money out of it on a periodic basis, then I need long-term care. Say I'm taking out $2,000 a month, it will double and to go to $4,000 a month to use toward my long-term care. So it gives me peace of mind knowing that if I need it for long-term care, I have it. If I don't, no big deal. I'm still getting money out of it that I can't ever outlive. So either one of those are strategies. If you don't have the ability to buy long-term care because of health issues or concerns that you might never use it, something like that, it still gives you your control over your money. Now, some folks ask about required minimum distributions. Now, those are the amount of money that the federal government says you have to start taking out of a tax deferred plan, such as an IRA, such as a 403B or a 401k. Every month, you have to take out that money, or once a year for what they think is the whole amount, once you reach a certain age, 70 or 70 and a half or 72, depending on when you were born. And if you haven't taken them out yet, some people will use their RMDs towards long-term care premiums because they weren't anticipating using that money, but the federal government requires you to take some money out. You can use it for that way. Some people will use, if they have some sort of earned income, meaning that it's not your pension. Say you're working a second job somewhere, something like that, another job, and you've got earned income, you can set up a health savings account, which is pre-tax money that you put in there. You can use that to purchase long-term care because the federal government believes that everyone should have long-term care. And if you do it properly with a health savings account, you're basically saving 38% on a long-term care policy. And then finally, some people will say, because of arthritis, because of family history of Alzheimer's, or whatever reason, they wouldn't qualify for a long-term care plan. You can use the provisions in a lump sum cancer, heart, and stroke policy to pay for your care. The number 2 and number 3 reasons why people go into long-term care are for cancer, heart attack, and stroke. And so you could take 75,000 of that lump sum and use that for your care as well. So there are some options, some other unique ways that you can pay for long-term care. I know we've talked about a ton of different things out there. Please feel free to put your questions in chat. We're going to come up at the end and stop the recording here in just a moment. Quick reminder, we've just wrapped up our first quarter. Spring is coming. We're going to have our second quarter calendar out very soon. Always look out there on the MRTA website. Look for the emails that come to you, letting you know. This is a great way to tell people about MRTA Share this with your friends, share this with your former coworkers, get them involved in MRTA, help them learn as well. So thank you for joining us today. If you've got questions, please feel free to hit the chat. If you want to raise your hand, I can recognize you as well. If you want to take your smartphone, open up your smartphone, hover over with your camera, open up your camera like you're going to take a photo, but don't take a picture. Simply hover over that QR code. A little form will pop up and you can fill out that form, hit submit. It comes to me within a few seconds. I've already got 1 or 2 of those that have come in. We can help someone, depending upon your geography in the great state of Missouri, get you taken care of. Someone can call you and answer all your questions. If you're on a tablet, if you're on your cell phone and you don't have access to your smartphone, simply email me, john.green@amba.info, and I would be glad to answer any question that you have. You can just put, give me your phone number. I'll call you back. I'll give you my phone number if you want it, that kind of stuff. We can talk. I've done that with many MRTA members, or I can get you in contact with someone who is licensed in your state. That's the one thing. If you want to get talking about specific coverages or policy provisions and rates, I'm not licensed in the state of Missouri, but Kel or Gary, one of the members on his team are, and they can answer any question that you have as well. So I'm going to stop the recording now.